Good evening. My name is Yasmin. I am a business development at Actio, and I'm going to be your host for today. Actio is a tech company focused in tools that increase corpor- corporative performance and help the executives to achieve their main goals. I have a few information to share with you about our meeting. Um, our meeting is going to last around an hour. We can guarantee you a certificate of attendance if you're interested. We are going to share the link with you in the chat during the meeting. We are also going to share a link with you for further questions if you're interested in asking or guess anything. Um, Antonio is with us today on the chat. He's going to be interacting with us. He's the one taking care of everything behind the screens. And I am going to talk about our agenda for a few seconds. So we are going to have a whole of questions. So a back to back between Guilherme and Venkat. And then in the end, we'll have around 10 to 15 minutes to ask questions. So feel free to interact with us in the chat, make comments, ask questions. We are going to answer everything in the end of our meeting. So welcome. I'm going to welcome our guest now. I'll start with Guilherme. He's our CEO, and he's a renowned consultant with over 2 decades of experience. He has collaborated with both national and multinational organizations in Brazil and abroad. He has a really good background in the topic, so we are very excited. Hi, Guilherme. Boa tarde.
Hello. Thank
And
you all for
also,
participating.
so we have Venkat. He is our special guest. He is enterprise risk management specialist, also with over 20 years of experience in the oil and gas, energy, financial, and sectors. So he currently works in a big company in Kuwait, and he works with overseeing risk strategy, modeling, and reporting. So welcome, Kuwait.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
So to start, I guess I'll read the first question so we can have a quick chat. Um, is everything okay with my audio? Yeah, can you guys hear
I
me?
can hear you fine. I see that
Okay,
someone is having some trouble with the audio, but at least I hear you fine. Yeah.
okay, good. So the first question, so guys, in your experience, what are the main challenges of implementing ESG in the company and integrating it with strategic and risk management?
Good. That's a good question, actually. And now I think the entire trend is currently moving around ESG. ESG. You go to any industry, may it be a banking sector, may it be a manufacturing sector, energy sector, whatever sector you take, the people talk about ESG. But the main question is, do really people know what exactly ESG is? So people may know the definition, environmental, social, governance, but no. So that's not just all, like, you just take the risks, or you just calculate the risks of ESG. So the basic thing for the basic challenges for implementing or incorporating ESG in an organization, for me, what I have seen in my experience is the basic definition of the standards, the basic definition of the ESG regulations, and then the standards. Like, for example, every organization has got their own set of standards. Like, the same standards that are applicable for a banking industry may not be the same for an energy industry. The same standards that are applicable for manufacturing sector may not be appropriately applicable for a software industry. So likewise, every organization, every enterprise, every business has got their own set of regulations and standards in which they need to apply. So the first basic thing is to clearly articulate or clearly define the regulations and standards applicable for the industry. And then based on those standards, they need to devise a plan accordingly. That we will discuss in the later things. So currently I'm discussing about the challenges. So the first challenge for me is the definition of ESG and the articulation of regulations and standards. The second major thing is, once you have the standards, then what next? So what next is, we may have to look at the availability of the data or the quality of the data. Like for example, many large organizations have got a huge data sets, but smaller organizations or moderate organizations may not have appropriate and a quality data set, data availability. So that's a big challenge for anybody to report anything. Like for example, if I go to an energy industry and I ask for ESG data, for example, what are your flaring limits? Maybe the HSE guy knows, but what if he's on a vacation, or what if he's on a or he left the company? So these things, if you don't have a particular data set record or data, the quality of data being accredited at a appropriate level in the organization, you won't be able to do, or you won't be able to implement the ESG standards. So that is the second main thing. The third thing is in terms of the third party compliance. Like for example, maybe I'm working for a big organization and my organization is complying to ESG standards, but the supplier who is supplying the raw material to me is a small company, and he is not appropriately qualified enough to understand ESG and then implement ESG. So that is something that is once again coming up as a big risk, or you can say that big challenge for ESG integration or ESG implementation. Likewise, there are certain regulatory and political uncertainties, that keeps on changing. Like for example, recently the Trump government has got, uh, there was a set of standard for carbon emissions, carbon reductions, and etc. In the previous Biden government. But recently in the Trump government, they simply said that no, I think energy is there. I mean, you can drill whatever you want, and you can pump whatever oil you want. So these sort of things, every government comes with certain set of political uncertainties and regulatory challenges, that the company has to face while implementing ESG. Do you have any views on this topic? I mean, it would be appropriate for us to discuss.
Yeah, actually, well, first, welcome you all. It's very good to have you all here in our webinar. And I actually have questions for you. You're the expert in the subject,
Yeah.
and I want to pick your brain as much as possible, right? Um, the first point, you mentioned like the standards, right? You have to know your standards by your industry. So each industry is creating their own standards, right? Have you seen, you've been working in this realm for quite some years now. Have you seen these standards evolve, and are they becoming more industry specific with time? I have another follow-up question, but if you
Yeah.
we can
So
start with
yeah.
this one.
So when I started my work in 2004, it's 21 years now. So I saw that the standards were mostly, related to OHS, like, OSAS, the safety standards.
Mhm.
And then at the time there was no ISO standards. Maybe the company that I was working was not aware of ISO standards. Then slowly
Mhm.
came in ISO 9000, the first certification, the standard certification for quality. So likewise, and then in ISO itself, recently we see that I think some at least I can name at least a 20 to 30 standards for business continuity, for emergency preparedness, for IT related standards. So if you look at the industries as they keep on evolving, the standards also keep on evolving, and it's necessary as well, because otherwise there is no control for the operations to look at. In olden days it was only HSE. I mean, people, if they met met the HSE standards, it was okay. But now for every department, there is something called a sustainability to be achieved, and again there is something called ISO standards that the sustainability has to be met. So that is something.
Okay. So it's becoming ever more specific by industry,
Exactly.
right? Another follow-up question is that you mentioned that the companies must have their data about ESG, right? Have the data sets. I imagine that a company that is beginning to look into ESG and wanting to implement these management practices and reports and so on, I imagine they don't start with data sets, right? So, should a company wait to have their data sets all in place to start implementing ESG, or they should start implement and add the data sets throughout the process, right? This is something
Yeah.
that I face a lot when we're implementing software, because some people say, oh, we need to have perfect data before we start implementing, right? What's your take on this?
There was a similar experience for us as well. So while we were discussing an implementation of certain software, I think the same thing. The old school is always of the view that we need to have something, and then only we can implement something. So then, so I was the advisor for that committee, and then I came up with an idea that we don't need to have the data set ready. What we can do is we can request the consultant or the company, the software company, to have the benchmarks aligned. So for every operations, like for example, certain standards, so they have the benchmarks already set. From the benchmarks, then from that date we can start recording based on those benchmarks. And for that you don't need to have data in place already. If you start collecting the data, I mean, the risk for what you mentioned, if you start collecting data, it will take at least an year, and by this year there might be further evolvement that they may not be able to catch up in the going forward. So that is something that they may have to look at, and not wait for the data to be collated, and then I mean, even if they have got some 10 sets of data points, still they can start ahead with this.
Okay. Um, all right. I think we can move on to the next question.
Sure.
I'll ask the next question to you, right? So, why is it important to make ESG strategy part of the overall company strategy, right? Why is it important to connect, corporate strategy and ESG strategy?
Sure. So, I mean, I would take an example and then further explain this. Like for example, in my organization, so we have a strategy to be a 5 million barrels of oil per day in the next 1 year. So that's a short term strategy. So 5 million barrels of oil is the strategy. So that strategy is further broken down into sub strategies and sub things. So to achieve 5 million barrels, so I may have to look at what is my existing capacity, so existing norm currently. So based on that, I may have to first of all reach to understand what is the value creation from this strategic goal. So we may have to understand how ESG is looking into it. So once I add further oil to my existing portfolio, so what is that is going to implement that is going to impact me at a shorter term? So there might be some climate change related issues, there might be some regulatory related issues, some social related issues, and also financial stabilities. So, based on these things, we may have to look at how the regulatory compliance aspect and the risk management goes through it. So, ESG is already in hand in a glove with ERM department. So, ERM department is something that is already a bit of incorporated within ESG. And ERM, ERM is enterprise risk management, and enterprise risk management is a part of the strategy, the corporate strategy. So that is one. So based on this implication, you can understand that why ESG is required to be a part of strategy, because when a business goal is designed or a vision is applied, so you see that there are various sub related things like compliance things, ESG commitments, factors, investments, like for example funding, because nowadays it has been what do you say, nowadays it has been funding, it has been a requirement from the global banks to meet the ESG requirements, and for that they are looking for the ESG related data for the last 3 to 5 years, and that has been a norm. So that's why we see that ESG should be a part of the strategy. While it becomes a part of strategy, there are various good things that happen. Is it enhances the long term value creation for the project. It also creates a set of regulatory and compliance management things set for the project already. Then it also improves the brand reputation as well as the stakeholder trust. So nowadays, more and more major for bigger projects, the banks are already a part of it. Excuse me. So you also attract investors as well as capital access, and likewise you also have got a global standards, sustainability trends that are already aligned within to this. So these are the major things for me that I remember for now.
Perfect. So when we think of maybe a balanced scorecard strategy map, ESG is connected to basically all of the perspectives, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
From finance, like the example you said, attracting
I have.
investors and
Yep.
therefore reducing cost of capital, right?
Yep. Yep.
Uh, Brand impact and
Yep.
market perspective,
That's right.
compliance, regulatory compliance in the process perspective, and in learning and sustainability, like the last perspective
Yeah.
on BS and balanced scorecard. You probably can fit that in almost every objective that shows up there, right?
Perfect. Yeah.
Uh,
Correct.
What other examples, aside from the ones you already mentioned and I repeated here, would you see, like in this balanced scorecard perspective, where ESG fits in?
So,
Do you
ESG records the sustainability targets. ESG records the strategic objectives, and it measures the strategic measures, strategic initiatives progress on a regular basis. So, there is a dashboard that we have created for ESG dashboards. And I saw that Actio also has got one, a very good one. So so the balance scorecard is something that gives you a advantage or an edge to understand what my targets were, how are the targets progressing, what is that the targets, if at all, what is the thing that is hindering my progress in terms of catching up my targets, and how is that the targets can be shared with the leadership as well as the external boards and etc.
yeah. Um, all right. I'm reading some comments here, but before we comment on those, I've seen a balanced scorecard. I don't remember which company it was, but that had what they call triple bottom line, right? Where in the objectives, they would highlight like objectives that have social impact or objectives that have environmental impact, governance impact. So when you looked at their strategy map, you could visually identify, you know, the triple bottom line there and what objectives leads to what perspective there in ESG. Have you seen other examples of in the strategy map communicating
Yep.
the ESG as well?
Yeah. So I can tell one example when I was working with BP after the Macondo incident. So the Macondo incident was a big incident, and then there was one Bly report. That Bly report had got 23 recommendations, and the 23 recommendations has got each recommendation had got some 4 or 5 objectives under it, and then it has to be implemented at 8 strategic locations of BP operations. So that was the biggest project I have done, and I think for more the first ever project of its kind. So in those days, it was still in the early days, it was still an Excel sheet. I mean, and many companies still rely on Excel sheet. Which is the biggest bottleneck for any operations, sustainable operations. So what happened is, so so there was a dynamic dashboard that was to be submitted at a regional level as well as a central level. So certain regional level issues were solved at regional level, but some certain issues that were not able to be solved at the regional level had to escalate it to the central level. So the dashboard somewhere really helps the people in terms of monitoring the ESG standards. Like for example, I can say the blowout preventer. So the blowout preventer, or well integrity management system, WIMS, we call it as WIMS, implementation of a WIMS. So certain geographies had got issues with their local governments, which have hindered them in terms of the environmental issues caused by the BP Macondo incident, like Gulf of Mexico. So the Gulf of Mexico already had got a huge impact with respect to this incident. So those regions were not able to implement it on time, whereas the banker, the bank that BP has lent a huge money at the time, was sitting on their head to understand if this can be implemented in those regions or not, so that the next set of financing can be awarded. So BP was in a huge set of was stuck in a huge set of constraints, that what how we can how we can deal with this issue, and etc. and all. So then they have deployed a software called SIP Clarity. It's called a Clarity. They self-designed it. They designed it within themselves. In those days, it was the issue I'm talking about is in 2013 and 2014. So they designed it, and then due to this dashboard, this was a dynamic dashboard. I mean, like, it was not like presented once a month or once in a quarter. No, dynamic dashboard. You update it today, tomorrow you will get a notification, and that was that quick. And everybody who has everybody 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 who has got the rights to read those data can read it on a live. So that way the issues were tackled on a daily and an hourly basis, rather than waiting for a month or waiting for a quarter to understand and then to be escalated to the management level. So that is one instance that I remember, and I really come up with that sort of and I was very fortunate enough to have that sort of experience in my early days of career.
Interesting. Yasmin?
Well, we have a few comments. Would you guys like me to read them? Well, Godfrey said that he agrees and that any business aspiring to establish the ESG should endeavor to establish a baseline of study and benchmarks, because relying on that set, providers might not even reflect what the business needs. And also Hillary said that you need to be careful when maintaining that the USC strategy map should be based on strategy, the initiative, and measurements, and not operational in its nature. I will let you guys discuss a little bit, and then we can go to the further question.
Yeah, my suggestion, Yasmin, is if we can move on, because I'm a little worried about the time. Let's keep the questions to the end, if you don't mind.
Perfect. So having in mind also what Venkat has mentioned about structure of a company and ESG. So is ESG just a compliance measure for a company, or are there any competitive advantages in having ESG strategy in your company?
So I think this question is bit interrelated with the previous question itself. Most of the things that we have mentioned, like you have got a brand reputation, as well as the banking requirements, as well as market differentiation, as well as I mean, most importantly, I forgot to mention the operational efficiency as well as the cost savings that it can generate, as well as also it gives a competitive edge in B2B businesses as well as government contracts. So likewise, I think this question is a bit more interrelated with the previous one. So where we discussed how the ESG is very closely related with the strategy, the company strategy, and how the company strategy drives ESG, and as well as the ESG once get driven, how ESG drives the company. So this is both way related, interrelated to each other. The company strategy derives ESG, as well as once ESG starts working on its own, then it pulls back the strategy, and then both of them keep going along with the company progress.
Okay. Um, and have you seen when, I mean, I know you have very large experience with consulting, right? Before you
Yeah.
work in the current company. Um, have you seen how much companies are actually using this competitive advantage uh, in the market, or are they do ESG, but they don't transform that in a real competitive advantage? I mean, it's possible to do so, right? We just mentioned it can even be connected to the strategy map, but how much do you see companies actually doing it?
Yeah, I mean, in recently, especially in energy industry, there has been ESG reporting, a separate ESG reporting, a ESG report, you can say. And in ESG report, there are some strategic targets that each company is promising to reduce their carbon emissions by 2050. Somebody says by 2045, somebody says by 2040. So that depends. So in that case, what happens is every company is trying to be in the game in a competitive manner by saying that we adhere to ESG, as well as we have got certain targets, certain sustainability roadmap we have got that we are trying to achieve by this stipulated time. And likewise, there is a huge global fund for this initiative. So there was a ESG in Paris Agreement. We call it as Paris Agreement. In that Paris Agreement, there is a huge fund, and every company as a competitive competitor strategy, they are trying to knock that fund by the sustainable strategies. So, so the lesser the sustainable targets, the more the fund they get from the Paris Agreement. So, like I said, ESG is a business growth strategy, but not just a compliance. So, ESG has got much more than what actually is being reported. It's not just a medium to report. It's something more than what actually people think to about ESG. So with ESG, they can achieve a lot more of energy sustainable, as well as regulatory compliance goals as well, and be in the market with a competitive advantage.
Perfect. Yasmin?
Well, having in mind also what Guilherme just asked, how it can grow and expand. What do you believe are the stage of ESG risk management and different in various industries? How is it growing? What's the stage of development? How do you see it?
So yeah, I think the development of this project depends on the industry as well. Like if it's for financial services, I think it will hardly take 6 months for it to develop, and then start implementing it and get implemented as well. Within 6 months you can do it for financial industries, whereas for technology as well as telecommunications, like for example software industry, it can take a bit within 6 months time. But if the organization is bigger, like for example they have got multiple locations as well as multiple assets, then I think the targets for sustainability needs to be defined, and it will take time. And I'm sure that at least 2 years of time definitely it will take for any organization to become a matured, highly matured ESG organization, ESG, sustainable, and as well as reputable organization within ESG standard.
Perfect. And can you mention by industry, what industries are typically leading this initiative of implementing ESG, and which industries are actually lagging in this effort?
Yeah, so I will divide this topic into four, which comprises of highly mature, moderately mature, early stage, as well as emerging ESG. So highly mature are those organizations that have got proactive and they are considered to be the proactive as well as the industry leaders. So they have got a established ESG frameworks, rigorous risk assessments, and strong regulatory compliances as well. So in that, I would mention financial services, the banks, asset management, and insurance companies. These are the leading ones. They have got a very sustainable finance. They have got a standards that are established with respect to IFRS as well as sustainable finance and climate, and they have got certain things related to the policies and regulatory compliance with respect to the SEC rules as well as TCFD reporting as well. So, and in the energy industry, you can say that renewable energy has got a lot of is more matured as compared to the regular energy, like organization of mine. So, renewable energy as well as utilities, is the water, electricity company, and the water company, and etc. and all. So they have got a lot of net zero commitments as well as ESG linked financing and carbon footprint reduction initiatives well in advance and implemented. The third comes the technology and telecommunication. So they have got the digital ethics as well as the efficient data centers that are already put in place, and then they have got good governance practices as well as transparent ESG reporting. So these three industries are the highly matured ESG organizations, or you can say sectors. The moderately are the ones like oil and gas and mining, so some organizations that are within the carbon footprint, pollution, water usage, as well as they have got human right issues. So the focus is more on the human right issues as well. Then comes the automotive and transportation, like the shifts to EVs, shifts to hydrogen, alternate fuels. So this is something that these companies are in a moderate, mature organizations for ESG. Likewise, the pharma companies, the pharmas and the healthcare, they have got a very good ESG related issues defined, ESG related initiatives and actions defined, and then they are moderately matured. Then the early stage are the construction and the real estate. So we see that there are a lot of construction companies, maybe not in the other part of the world, but in Dubai, in Middle East, there's a lot of construction activity happening on. And majorly, you can see that MR and Danube and etc. So these companies are more into green buildings, sustainable materials, as well as energy efficient infrastructures. So they are still at the early stage, and it needs to be implemented at a whole lot of scale. Then comes the agriculture and processing, and then the manufacturing and heavy industries, which are the early stage of ESG management. Emerging are the aerospace and defense organizations, logistics and shipping, as well as small and mid-sized SMEs. You can say small and mid-sized enterprises. These are the emerging ESG companies. So. So we discussed, I think, the entire landscape of the organizations. So which have been grouped into highly, moderately, early stage, and emerging. So these are the four
All
categories
right.
based on the maturity.
Yeah. I'm not surprised that the emerging ESG category, you have segments that are not directly connected to final consumers, right? Like
Yeah,
logistics or shipping, because they end up not they become part of the value chain of other companies, but many times that is not followed up on the companies that,
correct.
hire them. Small and mid-sized enterprises as well. They may not
Yeah,
have
correct,
the
correct.
resources to have the data and communicate and report, right? And aerospace and defense is also very government
Yeah,
led, right? So this is something, aerospace and defense. You mentioned right in the beginning of the talk, Trump's
regulatory.
position on this. Um, do you think that this political shifts that happen in various countries affect the aerospace and defense, or is
Not
there
really.
yeah, okay,
Not really. So aerospace and defense organizations are, they operate at much higher level, even beyond the government. So governments come in and go, but these
yeah,
organizations and these contracts are still in place. Like, for example, some negotiations that were done in 2015 are still being adhered in 2024. That's how the aerospace and defense organizations work. So the governments can come, they can go. The compliances are, they already have got certain set of compliances. They go through it, and if in between there are something new, so they have an immunity of the government, that the contracts that are discussed before need not adhere to the current new regulations.
great. And real estate in construction and food processing and agriculture, I was
Mhm.
surprised that they are still early stage in ESG, because
Correct.
they can be very much connected to final consumer and can tap into some value in
Correct.
having ESG. Why do you think? I don't know if you know these industries
Yeah, agree.
specifically, right?
But by agriculture, I don't say that these are the regular, small time farmers. So there are some agriculturists, like the food processing. Like, for example, uh, is somebody buying from the farmers and then retailing it and then selling it off or exporting it off. So we see a lot of rice being exported, a lot of wheat being exported, a lot of apples being exported. So so these have got the regular, certain pesticides, certain fertilizers causing the carbon footprints, increasing the carbon footprints. So they need to adhere to certain standards, going by the recent governments that have come in, and they have been imposing that the emissions, more organic, go organic, more grow organic. So these sort of slogans have been a part of this ESG culture itself, that people need to know what pesticides have gone into their foods, and what sort of fertilizers have been used while they were growing this food.
All right. Thanks, Yasmin.
Okay, so thank you very much. So I'd like to ask you, how can a company effectively implement ESG strategy, KPIs, and risk in integrated way with all the development we had with AI and technology? How can they do it in a more sophisticated way, and that it makes the process more reasonable for them?
Yeah, so Actio has, I have gone through the Actio suite of software, Tune and Belt, and I see, and recently I got an opportunity to go through the software in detail. and I think it has got very good features, the latest features you can say, that are adhering to the recent industry standards have been incorporated into it, as well as the speed of reporting. The charm of the software is that it can do multiple stuff, track multiple things, as well as generate automated reports, dashboards, and etc. So that's really wonderful. And I think if time permits, I think Gyu, can we look at the software a
Yeah,
bit of this one?
absolutely. I can go through the software with you guys.
Yeah.
Very quick so we can have some time for questions still. But let me share the screen to kind of showcase how a software can help implement, how you can add technology to the process and make all of this, strategy, risk, and ESG connected in a single platform and easy to communicate. So this is an example of a strategy map, right? Very
Mhm.
generic. Uh, and with each strategic objective, I can drill down like the strategy perspective here. I'm gonna go into each of these, one of these strategic objectives, right? Add value to the shareholder, where I have KPIs measuring, right? I also have projects and OKRs, right? But my objective here is to show that a KPI can be drilled further down to next levels, and each of these KPIs can have risks that are attached to um, this measuring of this result, right? For example, I have a cash deficit working capital here, risk connected to this KPI. So if I'm looking into a strategic objective that is connected to OKRs, I'd be seeing all of the risks connected to this strategic objective, right, and KPIs. And the same for projects. So if I have a portfolio of projects, I can drill down into examples of, ESG related projects that are part of this strategic portfolio. So here I'm having the strategy perspective and how the elements of ESG, be them the KPIs, the projects, the risks, are connected to these strategic objectives in the more broader strategy map, right? But I can also have an ESG perspective here. So I can have a strategic view of ESG in the company. And let me change this to 23. That is when I know I have some more data. So here I have just a ESG report, but each topic of this report, I can click on it, for example, waste management, and open to next levels as well. So waste management is a hot topic for this particular company, and it has KPIs, right, that are being measured in this topic in waste management, right? It also has projects like waste management project, solid waste management project, which was part of that strategic objective, right, that I drilled down. So this project is being seen not only within the strategy, the corporate strategy, but also within a specific ESG strategy. So it's the same projects, same KPIs, right? And even same risks. So I have a risk here of mishandling hazardous or non-recyclable waste, where I can measure the controls and see how the controls are going, the mitigation plans, and so on, right? So all of these elements, I can see them in a strategy perspective or in a ESG perspective, or even in a risk perspective. So we could be, go into risk and see everything, every risk connected to ESG, right? There is an example here of I mentioned a triple bottom line strategy map. So in this example, they connected like the economic, social, environmental impacts and connected to each of the strategic objectives. So everything is very dynamic and connected here in the software. My suggestion is that we go for questions and answers. I went very fast in the software just to give an example, right, of how strategy, ESG, and risk can be connected and integrated. But feel free to contact us if you guys want a deeper demonstration of the software, right? We're here to help in that way. And Yasmin, I see that we have 3 questions, at least 3, right?
Yeah. So really quick before the questions, I would just like to remember everyone, if you want your certificate of attendance, don't forget to, get on the link in the chat. Also, if you are interested in the platform or in the subject, if you like to chat a little bit more, we also have a link where you can try to schedule a one-on-one meeting with Guilherme, our CEO, and so we can talk a little bit more, more specifically about your condition, your company, and your necessities specifically. And we will be contacting you guys right after, so we can try to create a community, talk a little bit more, so we can get to know our further events and also, products and etc. Everything. So we'll keep in touch, and so we can go to the first question. We have actually a question here in the chat about our platform. I believe it's to Guilherme. Guilherme would like to know if you would need to update the risk and risk categories, impact, velocity, and etc. on a regular basis. And if can the software also be cascaded from corporate to operational levels and cross divisions and regional zones?
Yeah, absolutely. We have clients that have many business units. Many are like holding companies that have different companies within its, holding company, and each one with different levels of ESG maturity, as well as very specific strategies, right? So just going back to the question, can the software also be cascaded into corporate to operational levels? Yes. I didn't show you in this demonstration because I was focusing on ESG, but yeah, you can connect strategic objectives all the way down to operational level KPIs. And you can also consolidate these operational level KPIs into, for example, a value chain perspective with macro processes, and have a very operational view of your company using the same set of KPIs, right? So you can analyze strategy or operation in the same software. The idea is exactly to connect all of these perspectives and management methodologies, I guess. Just going back to the question, I don't know if I answered everything. Would you need to update risk and risk categories, impact, velocity on a regular basis? I understand so. I'll also ask Venkat for his opinion on this, but yes, it's a continuous process, right? So if you have a risk, you will be continuously being assessing this risk. Some risks need more frequent assessing, quarterly or so. Other risks may require more, spaced out assessments yearly or so. So it depends a lot on your industry, depends a lot on the risks that you're talking about. But it is a continuous process. It's not something you do once and then you assess that risk and it'll stay like that forever, right?
Yeah,
Venkat,
I
do you
totally
have
agree
any?
with. Yeah, totally agree with you. Risk is a continuous business, so that is the slogan. So we can't shy away from regularly monitoring it. Even though you have got controls established for it, the risk mitigations, you may have to also measure the effectiveness of the risk mitigations that are being implemented, as well as track the progress of the risk mitigations. So both of them, and once you do it on a regular basis, then only you will get to understand how you could mitigate the risk. Otherwise, even though you monitor it, you buy a fancy software, but if you're not doing it regularly, I think it may not help you.
Okay, thank you guys. We have three questions. I think we can go a little bit fast through the first one. I think you guys already answered a little bit about this one, so we can go really quick on this. So is I don't know, the Trump policies can impact ESG programs and companies.
Okay. Well, I'll give my opinion and then I'd like to hear Venkat as well. I think it has less impact than media says, right? Because the reason why companies are implementing ESG policies have to do with their competitive advantage and with the final consumer looking and valuing that, right? So that in that aspect, it has little to do with politics and political pyrotechnic, right? So my opinion is that it has little direct impact, but it may create an environment that does not favor ESG, right? Like the gestalt of business. If it keeps like that for a long time, years and years, not just Trump's presidency, then it might impact. But I don't think it does that in the short term or for the reasons I mentioned. What do you think, Venkat?
Absolutely agree. So I don't think Trump's policies will impact ESG. There might be an impact on the carbon footprints, the carbon emissions, the carbon reduction, etc. So, but not the ESG programs. The ESG programs are more specific for the organization. In fact, you can say the way it is, like, you're enhancing your quality department, you're enhancing your safety department, you're enhancing your risk department. Likewise, ESG will also be enhanced as a regular practice. So this has got nothing to do with Trump, nothing to do with the local government, nothing.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you guys. So I guess the second one we can start with Venkat. So how can companies effectively integrate ESG principles into their corporate strategy and risk management framework to drive long-term value and resilience?
Yeah, I think this is a very valid question, but because we didn't have bit time to discuss on this, actually, this is a this is an 8-step process, you can say. So we need to align the ESG with the ERM framework and the risk taxonomy first. Then identify and assess ESG risks within the ERM process, enterprise risk management process. Integrate ESG into the risk appetite and tolerance. Then quantify the ESG risks with the data and scenario analysis. Then integrate the ESG into the reporting and governance. So I'm not going deeper into each section, but I'm just reading out the steps that are highly recommended to look at. Then link the ESG risks into the business strategy and decision making. Finally, establish an ESG ownership as well as accountabilities. And then you need to monitor it on a continuous basis, like we just discussed. So it is just an 8-step process, and it has got a lot of sub activities to be discussed. And it would, the implementation at all would be one more separate webinar, I can say,
Yeah.
that we may have to discuss maybe sometime later. But yeah, so these are the high level steps, you can say.
All right. There's a question here on the chat I'd like to address, Yasmin, if you don't mind. So the second part of Hillary's question is the ability to, if it's possible to include interrelated risks, so impact of one risk on another, and cross-region operations, similar to strategy map linkages. Yes, you can do that. You can connect the elements, be it risks, objectives, KPIs, projects, amongst themselves and create this cause and effect, chain where you can monitor, all the way down to the level you wish. We unfortunately ran out of time for the last question.
Let's take the
Venkat,
question. Let's take
okay,
the
go ahead.
question. Yeah, it's okay, no problem.
Okay, let's take the question then. Go ahead, Yasmin.
Okay, so Venkat gave us a full recipe on how to implement ESG. So we have one more question a bit related to that. What are the key challenges and best practices for aligning ESG initiatives with corporate strategy? Where
I
should
think,
we start?
yeah, I think this was the very first question we discussed today. The lack of the definitions of ESG standards is a major thing. Then the data quality and availability. Then we have got certain things like resistance to change and cultural shifts within an organization. There are certain old school leadership who don't want to implement new things, so there is a resistance to it to understand new complex concepts as well as complex initiatives. So they show a bit of resistance. The finally the the basic challenge to implement is that you need to have the right definition of ESG that is applicable to your organization, to your industry. So once you have the definition, then you need to have a right set of data really collect and then connect it with the next step of organization. Then finally you need to convince your organization leadership to go ahead and implement with this. The best practices obviously it's again a huge topic to be discussed. So yeah, so you can connect with me. I mean, if you don't mind, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can connect with you, so that we are all alike, we are all same. So we are a part of team. So you can connect with them or you can connect with me. So we can have a discussion, further round of discussion on this.
Perfect. There's just one question here from John. If we're going to send the recorded sessions, yes, we're going to send out an email with the recorded session. If you want to watch it again or share with someone, feel free to do so. And I'd like to thank everybody that stayed also these last few minutes, and especially Venkat for his
Thanks,
expertise
Gil,
here.
for providing me the opportunity as well. I would be overwhelmed to discuss more on this topic because I'm a bit of passionate for ESG and ERM. So that's my core area. So yeah, thanks for this opportunity to connect with you guys and to share my perspectives with the larger audiences. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Venkat. Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Bye-bye.